It was a crisp morning in Dallas, Texas, the kind where the air carried just a slight bite, cool enough for a hoodie but not quite cold enough for a jacket. Jonathan Reed, a man who had built his company from the ground up, took a deep breath as he stepped out of his car, a sleek black Tesla Model S. Nothing too flashy, but still a car that turned heads in the right circles. Today wasn't about business meetings, conference calls, or signing deals. Today was about something far more personal. Jonathan had always prided himself on the values his company stood for: fairness, innovation, accessibility. It was why his fintech bank, NovaTrust Financial, had grown so fast. It wasn't just about managing money. It was about changing the way banking worked for everyday people. At least, that's what he believed. But something had been nagging at him. Complaints had started to trickle in. Subtle at first, nothing that set off alarms, but the pattern was unmistakable. Black customers being questioned more aggressively than others, transactions delayed, extra verification steps that didn't seem necessary. And even though his executive team assured him they were looking into it, he needed to see it for himself. So he decided to go undercover. No tailored suit, no designer watch, just a plain navy hoodie, dark jeans, and a pair of sneakers. A look that made him blend in, not stand out. He wasn't Jonathan Reed, the CEO, today. He was just another man walking into the bank looking to make a withdrawal. As he pulled open the heavy glass door of the NovaTrust Financial branch on Elm Street, the scent of freshly brewed coffee and printer ink filled the air. The bank wasn't particularly busy. A few customers sitting in chairs, a man in a business suit chatting with a banker at one of the desks, and two tellers stationed behind the counter. He stepped into line, waiting his turn. The moment his eyes scanned the room, he started noticing things. The older white man in front of him walked right up to the counter, handed over his ID, and got his cash in less than 2 minutes. The young Latina woman behind him. A quick transaction, no questions, asked. Jonathan reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet, thumbing through his IDs, driver's license, corporate ID, debit card, all in perfect order. There was no reason for anything to go wrong. Next, the voice came from a young woman at the counter. Name tag Megan. Jonathan stepped forward, greeting her with a polite nod. Hey there. I need to withdraw $11,200 from my business account. Megan's smile wavered just a little, almost imperceptible, but Jonathan caught it. Of course, sir. I'll, just need to see your ID. He slid his driver's license across the counter. She picked it up, examining it for longer than necessary, then glanced up at him. Do you have your debit card as well? Jonathan raised an eyebrow but handed it over without hesitation. She typed something into her computer, eyes flicking back and forth between the screen and his ID. Then after a pause, she spoke again. Could you confirm your business's EIN number for me? Jonathan kept his expression neutral. Sure. He recited the number. She typed again. Another pause, a longer one. Jonathan glanced behind him. The line had grown. A man in a polo, shirt and slacks had walked up to the other teller who was already handing him cash. No extra questions. Jonathan turned back to Megan. Her hands hovered over the keyboard. She hesitated, then looked up again. Actually, let me just get my manager real quick. One moment. She pushed back from the counter and disappeared into the back office. And just like that, Jonathan knew exactly where this was heading. But this was just the beginning. Jonathan exhaled slowly, keeping his face neutral. He wasn't surprised. He wasn't even angry yet. He had been in rooms where deals worth hundreds of millions of dollars were made in a matter of minutes with nothing but a handshake and a signature. Yet here he was, at his own bank, waiting for permission to withdraw his own money. A few feet away, the other teller was finishing up with a customer, a middle-aged white man in a golf shirt and khakis. No extra questions, no manager needed. Just a quick transaction and a smile. Jonathan's stomach tightened, but he stayed composed. From the corner of his eye, he saw Megan return with a short, stocky man in his early 50s. His name tag read Rick, branch manager. Rick had that look, the one Jonathan had seen too many times before. The one that said, "I already don't trust. You and I haven't even spoken to you yet." "Good afternoon, sir," Rick said, forcing a tight smile. "I just wanted to go over a couple of things before we process your request." Jonathan nodded slowly. "Sure. What's the issue?" Rick took a long pause, as if choosing his words carefully. "Well, it's just a matter of verification. Withdrawals of this size require some extra steps." Jonathan tilted his head slightly. "Is that a policy? Because I didn't see any mention of it on your website." Rick's smile stiffened. "It's, just a standard security measure. You know, to protect against fraud." Jonathan held his gaze. "Fraud?" His voice was calm, controlled. "You think I'm committing fraud?" No, Rick said quickly, waving a hand. "Nothing like that. It's just that, we have to be careful with large withdrawals, especially when we don't recognize the account holder personally." Jonathan almost laughed at that. He owned this bank. His name was on internal memos, investor reports, corporate filings. But now, suddenly, he was just another unfamiliar customer. "I see," Jonathan said, keeping his voice steady. "What exactly do you need from me?" Rick hesitated. "Well, I'd like to see another form of ID. And if you have a recent utility bill, that would help confirm your address." Jonathan blinked. "A utility bill?" Rick gave a small, uncomfortable shrug. "Just standard procedure." Jonathan let a silence stretch between them, and in that silence he saw it. The doubt in Rick's eyes, the way he kept glancing at the computer screen as if looking for an excuse to deny the request. He wasn't following a policy. He was following a feeling. Jonathan had seen this before. The way people doubted his position, his legitimacy, his right to be in the rooms he walked into, the way their eyes flickered with hesitation when he introduced himself as the CEO. Now it was happening here, at his own bank. Jonathan slowly reached into his wallet, pulled out his corporate ID, and slid it across the counter. Rick frowned, slightly as he picked it up. He read the name. He stared at the company logo. Then his lips pressed together. Jonathan didn't need to say anything. He could see the gears turning in Rick's head, the hesitation, the realization. And still Rick cleared his throat and said, "I'm going to need to verify a few things. If you could just wait here, sir." And just like that, the waiting game began. But Jonathan wasn't just another customer, and this wasn't over. Jonathan glanced at his watch. 12 minutes. That's how long he had been standing there waiting. Rick had disappeared into the back office, probably making a call, probably trying to verify something that didn't need verification. Meanwhile, the line at the bank moved smoothly. Customers walked up, handled their transactions, walked out. No one else was asked for a second ID. No one else was told to wait. Jonathan could feel the weight of stares, not from the employees, but from other customers. A few people in line glanced at him, then quickly looked away. One man, a young guy in a navy blazer, gave him a knowing look. Not a look of pity, but of recognition. Jonathan took a slow breath. He had two options. One, he could drop his CEO status right now, make it clear who he was, demand the withdrawal and watch them scramble. Or two, he could wait, let this play out, see how far they were willing to take it. He chose the second, not because he wanted to be patient, but because he needed to see it. All of it. Another 5 minutes passed before Rick finally emerged, from the back. His face had changed. He looked uneasy, as if whatever he had just learned made him realize he had stepped into something bigger than he thought. Sir?" he said, his voice noticeably tighter now. "Unfortunately, we're having some issues verifying your account." Jonathan stared at him. "I gave you my driver's license, my business debit card, my corporate ID. What exactly are you unable to verify?" Rick hesitated. It's our system. It's flagging the transaction as irregular." Jonathan raised an eyebrow. "Irregular? What's irregular about a business owner withdrawing money from his own account?" Rick swallowed. "Like I said, it's just a security measure. We I'd like to speak to your regional director. Rick blinked. That threw him off. Excuse me? Jonathan's voice remained calm, measured, but firm. I know how this works, Rick. I know every protocol in this bank. And nowhere does it say that a customer withdrawing $11,200 should be treated like they're committing fraud. Now, since you seem unable to approve this transaction, I'd like to speak to your regional director. Rick froze. He had been in control of this conversation up until that moment. Now he wasn't. There was a brief silence. Then he forced another tight smile. I'll just be a moment. And just like that, he vanished again. But this time, Jonathan wasn't just going to stand there. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and made a call of his own. And what happened next? Rick wasn't ready for it. Jonathan pressed his phone to his ear as the call rang. Once, twice. Then a familiar voice answered. NovaTrust Corporate, this is Stephanie. Stephanie Williams, his chief operating officer. Hey, Steph, Jonathan said, keeping his voice calm but firm. I need you to do something for me. There was a slight pause. Jonathan, what's going on? I'm at the Elm Street branch trying to withdraw money from my own account. They've sent me through extra verification, asked for multiple forms of ID, and now the manager is trying to verify my account in the back. Stephanie didn't respond immediately. Then her tone shifted. They're doing what? I'll explain later. Right now, I need you to call the regional director. Tell them to call this branch right now. On it. Jonathan hung up and slipped his phone back into his pocket. Rick had no idea what was coming. Less than 2 minutes later, he reappeared, but his entire demeanor had changed. His face was flushed, and there was a barely concealed tension in his posture. Sir, he said quickly, we appreciate your patience. I just got off the phone with our regional office, and there was a misunderstanding with our system. Jonathan folded his arms. A misunderstanding? Rick swallowed. Yes, it seems that your account wasn't flagged after all. I apologize for the inconvenience. Jonathan tilted his head slightly, studying him. So now, suddenly, my account is fine? Rick forced a tight laugh. Yeah, just a mix-up. Jonathan let the silence drag. Rick was sweating. Then the phone at the teller's desk rang. Megan, who had been listening wide-eyed, quickly answered it. Her face went pale as she handed the receiver to Rick. It's corporate, she whispered. Rick snatched the phone. Hello? The conversation was brief, but from the way Rick's shoulders stiffened, Jonathan could tell exactly what was being said. When Rick finally hung up, his entire face was red. He turned back to Jonathan, clearing his throat. Sir, again, I sincerely apologize for the delay. If you'll just step back to the counter, we'll process your withdrawal immediately. Jonathan didn't move. He kept his eyes locked on Rick, letting the weight of the moment settle. And you know who I am now, don't you? Rick didn't answer. Jonathan leaned in slightly. I'm the CEO of this bank, the owner, the person who pays your salary. And yet I just went through something that no one else in this building had to deal with. So tell me, Rick, what exactly made me different? Rick opened his mouth, closed it, looked around as if hoping for an escape. There wasn't one. Jonathan wasn't here for an apology. He was here for the truth. Rick swallowed hard. I was just following security procedures. Jonathan shook his head. No. You were following a feeling. And that feeling told you that someone who looks like me, dressed like me, couldn't possibly have this much money. That I was a risk. A problem. Something that needed extra verification. Rick had nothing to say to that. The bank was dead silent now. Employees, customers, everyone had stopped pretending not to listen. Jonathan took his wallet, pulled out his business card, and slid it across the counter. This is my direct line. I expect a full report on this incident on my desk by Monday. And trust me, Rick, we will be having a conversation about whether you should still be working here. Rick's hands trembled as he picked up the card. Jonathan turned to Megan. Process my withdrawal? She nodded instantly. typing as fast as her fingers could move. 30 seconds later, she slid the cash across the counter. Jonathan picked it up, placed it in his wallet, and without another word, walked out of the bank. But this wasn't over, not by a long shot. Jonathan stepped out of the bank and into the bright Texas sun, but the heat on his skin didn't match the fire burning inside him. He climbed into his Tesla, closed the door, and just sat there for a moment. The money was in his wallet. He had won, if you could even call it that. But this wasn't a victory. It was proof. He had heard the stories, read the complaints, but now he had felt it firsthand. He had been made to feel like a criminal at his own institution, the same bank that, in every corporate meeting, claimed to stand for equity and inclusion. Jonathan stared at his reflection in the rearview mirror. If this could happen to him, what about the customers who didn't have power? Who didn't have a direct line to corporate? Who couldn't make one phone call and turn the whole situation around? His hands gripped the steering wheel. This wasn't just about Rick. Rick wasn't an anomaly. He was a symptom of something deeper, a system that allowed bias to masquerade as security. And Jonathan had a choice to make. He could handle this, quietly. Fire Rick. Implement some extra diversity training. Release a carefully worded statement about commitment to fair treatment. Or he could go deeper. Rip up the roots. Expose the problem. Fix it. For real. His phone buzzed. Stephanie. He answered. I just got off the phone with corporate, she said, her voice sharp with controlled anger. They are pissed. The regional director is scrambling to do damage control. Jonathan sighed. Good. Stephanie hesitated. So, what now? Jonathan stared out at the street, his mind already moving. Now, he said, we change the way this bank does business. From the ground up. Because today it had been me, but tomorrow, it could be someone who doesn't have the power to fight back. And that is unacceptable. Jonathan didn't waste time. By the time he got back to NovaTrust's headquarters, he had already set up an emergency meeting with his executive team, legal department, and compliance officers. The message was simple. Fix this. Now. We talk about fairness. We talk about inclusion. But today, I got treated like a suspect for no reason other than a gut feeling. How many of our customers go through this, and how many don't have the power to push back? The room was silent. No one argued. No one made excuses. They all knew he was right, and so the changes came. Mandatory bias training wasn't enough. Jonathan ordered a full audit of all flagged transactions across every branch. Any pattern of discrimination, it would be exposed. Anonymous customer reports were launched. If anyone felt mistreated, they now had a direct line to corporate. Branch managers were put on notice. Any unjustified delays or profiling? Immediate consequences. And Rick? He was gone by the end of the week. But Jonathan wasn't just here to punish. He was here to rebuild. So he personally oversaw the hiring of new leadership at NovaTrust branches. He made sure that every manager understood. One thing, fair treatment wasn't a suggestion. It was a requirement. And after everything, Jonathan did one last thing. He released a statement. Not a corporate-approved, polished PR statement, but the truth. I am the CEO of this bank, and even I was treated unfairly. That tells me that our system is broken. But here's the difference. I can do something about it, and I will. The response was overwhelming. Customers flooded in with their own stories. Some had walked away from NovaTrust entirely because of experiences just like his. Others had stayed, hoping things would change. Now, for the first time, they believed it might. This wasn't about one bad manager or one bad policy. It was about something deeper, a system that let bias slip through the cracks. But Jonathan had power. And real power? It's not about how much money you have. It's about what you do with it. So he used it. And he made sure that no one else would have to fight the battle he fought that day. How many times has something like this happened and no one was there to speak up? It's easy to think, well, that's just the way things are. But the truth? We don't have to accept it. If you've ever been in a situation where you were treated unfairly, whether at a bank, a store, or anywhere else, your voice matters. Speak up, hold people accountable, because the moment we stop demanding better is the moment nothing changes. And for those in positions of power, use it. Not just to succeed for yourself, but to open doors for others. Because real change doesn't start with one person, but it does start with one decision.